Welcome to Corwin's Teacher to Teacher podcast with host Carol Pelletier Radford. Carol is an experienced classroom teacher, university educator, founder of mentoringinaction.com, and author of 4 best-selling professional books for teachers. She believes the best form of professional learning happens when teachers engage in authentic conversations and share their wisdom. In every episode, Carol and her guests share stories about pivotal moments in their careers, successful classroom strategies, and personal actions they take to minimize stress and stay healthy. The Teacher to Teacher podcast is a place to engage in authentic conversation and reflection with experienced educators. We hope these conversations will energize you, keep you inspired, and remind you why you chose to become a teacher.
Hello, welcome to the Teacher to Teacher podcast, Sharing Our Wisdom, with our host, Carol Radford. I am Tori Bachman, a Corwin editor and co-producer of this podcast, which we've created for teachers at all levels who are searching for practical wisdom they can use in their classrooms. We believe we're all constantly learning, and we're learning together. So one of the best parts of this podcast is I get to hang out with some of my favorite people, and today is no exception. I'm excited to introduce today's guests, 2 brilliant and interesting educators. On today's podcast, we'll talk with Vera Ahiyya and Mike Pelletier. Here's a bit of background on both Vera and Mike. Vera Ahiyya was raised in El Paso, Texas, with her wonderful mother and amazing grandparents. Vera has taught kindergarten and first grade for the last 18 years. She has a broad-reaching online presence that is dedicated to spreading her vast knowledge and love of inclusive children's books and collaborating with other educators. Vera is the author of the Corwin book, Rebellious Read Alouds, Inviting Conversations about Diversity with Children's Books, and she is the author of several children's books, including You Have a Voice and the Getting Ready series. Hi, Vera. Welcome to Teacher to Teacher.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So good to see you. Also joining us today is Mike Pelletier, who teaches AP History to 11th graders in Braintree, Massachusetts. Mike is in his 24th year teaching because he enjoys his students, his school, and the profession tremendously. Mike is an avid sports fan for all New England teams, and he closely follows Arsenal in the English League. He's a big fan of music of all genres and enjoys reading fiction. Mike is also one of the educators who's featured in Carol's recent book, When I Started Teaching, I Wish I Had Known, Weekly Wisdom for Beginning Teachers. Hey, Mike, thanks for making time to talk with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We'll settle in now for what's sure to be a great conversation between these 3 wonderful educators. I'll turn it over to Carol.
Thanks, Tori. Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Vera. So I'm excited about this conversation because we have a kindergarten teacher and a high school AP teacher. So our listeners probably are saying, wow, how are we going to make connections? Because we often, as educators, put ourselves into silos. And we have meetings with all the 5th grade teachers and the 4th grade, and we stay stuck. What I suggest or notice is that wisdom is wisdom across the grade levels and subject areas and what we teach. And the wisdom that comes from each of us, inside of us, is going to be shared today in this conversation. So let's just dive in. And Vera, would you share what you're currently doing in education and how you got here? And maybe also share, did you always want to be a teacher?
My name is Vera Ahiyya. I've started my teaching career in Austin, Texas, and I taught kindergarten there for a few years. Then we moved to Massachusetts. Outside of Boston, I taught in Bedford for 6 years and kindergarten there. And then we moved to my favorite place, which was Brooklyn, New York, where I taught, again, kindergarten for 6 years. I'm currently in Portland, Oregon. Last year, I opened a pre-K, the first pre-K in school. They had Head Start there, but they didn't have a feeder that would feed actually into the school. So I opened a pre-K there, and I loved it. But pre-K is no joke. It's a lot of hard work. Pre-K teachers, I don't think, get the respect and acknowledgement they deserve. And doing a lot of that work. And also the writing I was doing as a children's author kind of was very time consuming. It was hard to balance both lives. And so I'm very grateful I was able to take a year off during this year and the end of last year. I worked on completing my librarian degree. So I also have a degree in library science that I'm hoping to use and become a school librarian.
Oh, I love that. And did you always want to be a teacher or a preschool
So
kindergarten
yes and
teacher?
no. No, yes.
Okay.
Well, my
Yes.
it's a little complicated. My great grandfather, was a teacher in Mesquite, Texas, and he was a principal, teacher, and a bus driver during segregation in the South. And he really instilled the value of education to my grandparents. My grandfather, he later became a math teacher at a high school and then a principal. And my grandmother, his wife, was a first grade teacher. My mother was an English teacher, and my father was a ROTC teacher. So literally, my whole family is just a bunch of educators, which is
So you didn't have a choice? No.
well, I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to be my own person. I went to a medical magnet school for health sciences because I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a brain surgeon, like a pediatric brain surgeon. And I went to the college I chose had a high rate of students entering med school. So I was like, this is perfect. And I took a biology class. I failed my first exam and I called my mom. I was like, I don't know why I'm failing. I can't understand this is what I want to do. And she suggested I take an education class. And that was it. I fell in love with the
That was
teacher.
it.
Mm-hmm.
You
I still
fell
get to
into
be,
the trap, the
yeah, I
good
still
trap.
get to be a brain surgeon, just in a very different
Yes, in a
way.
different way.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, there's so much brain work with preschool and kindergarten kids, teaching all of those skills. I have a lot of respect for all of you. I taught fifth grade for 21 years and then worked in higher ed, but I cannot believe how you all can teach kids to do anything at that level. So welcome and thank you for sharing that story. Mike, what's your story? What are you doing now? And how'd you get here?
So currently I'm teaching 5 AP classes. I have 122 students, juniors in high school. And it's kind of crazy in a sense that I kind of occupy a really unique position in a way because it didn't start like that. When I began my career, I was teaching freshmen and seniors in different courses. But over time, it just sort of grew into, teaching this 5 AP courses. And it's challenging in different ways than I think some of my colleagues have, because I think we all face different unique challenges. Um, but it's also very, I don't know, it's very, I feel very fulfilled by it, and the students really are what make it great. Um, so, so yeah, I just have, all these, classes, and we have to move very quickly through the curriculum, and it just feels like I say to the students, this course is the marathon that you sprint. And we're going into the school vacation, and I sometimes I say we will have vacation after the AP exam. So it's just really a lot of work, but I think the students typically they're game for it, and my hope is that they feel like it is worth it in the end. That they're not just achieving some test score or anything like that. I really try to focus on making it fun and engaging, and then the scores and the performance sort of takes care of itself. And one of my things I say to them all the time is like, if you just try your best, then you really can have no regrets. And you're not a score and you're not a number. You're really your effort and your intention. So things like that I think help with the buy-in, because sometimes it can be tough when you're giving so much work.
Yes. AP is always that challenging part of a high school curriculum. And you've done that the whole time. You started out with some other courses, but it sounds like you've been doing AP for a long time, and as a beginning teacher, to take that responsibility on is usually even more pressure. You always wanted to be a teacher, though? What's that story?
So when Vera was sharing her story, I felt very similarly in the fact that I come from a family of teachers as well, and to some degree, like maybe did I have a choice either? But I think thinking back on it, I would say I think it was a natural career for me, in that it's and part of me was running away from it too, maybe in my earlier days, but in retrospect, I think it was more like, no, it's in the genes, it's part of the family, and it's what we do well. And I just remember in high school, just sort of anecdotally, we would have study groups, and I wouldn't say that I was leading the study group, but I would make sure that we were studying before we were goofing around, or things like that. So maybe there was just a part of me that was always a teacher, or in some way that was there. But I will say it has definitely felt like the right choice, and something that suits my temperament, and like I said, makes me feel really content.
Oh, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Vera. So I'm going to shift a little to a question that I ask everyone on the episodes about pivotal moments in your careers that guide you, that intuitively put you in the right place, or share wisdom, something that happens, usually an experience that makes a difference as you look back at this memory. Vera, would you be willing to share something that happened to you that has inspired you and will inspire us?
Yeah. So when I was in Bedford, Mass, I was a kindergarten teacher, and I was one of 9 teachers. It was a K-2 school, so we were just very focused on the little ones. And I was the English as a second language teacher. There's many new words for it now, but I had a predominant number of students who spoke other languages. Their home languages ranged from like Russian, Spanish, Hebrew, Japanese, and so on. I think one year I had 7 different languages in the classroom. And so I had, growing up in Texas, had a very moderate understanding of Spanish, but I felt confident in the like day-to-day, how you do school Spanish translation. And so I had a student who came from Spain, she spoke Castilian Spanish, which was different than Spanish I understood and spoke, but there was enough similarities to get through. And she was in her silent period. If you know anything about children who speak another language, they have a silent period before they become confident in speaking English or whatever the other language is. And so she was in her silent period. So she wasn't speaking to me or her classmates, but she seemed happy and content. And so I think fall came around, and it was time for conferences, and her mom was there. And again, I was in broken Spanish, my broken English sometimes as well, trying to help her understand the improvement her daughter had made, and how we were really looking forward to hearing her speak in English in the classroom, but understanding that came with time. And her mom made this face, and she was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, she speaks English at home all the time." And I said, "Well, what?" And she said that child goes home and reenacts her whole day. And she's the teacher, and her sister is the student. And she does almost word for word what we do in the classroom all day. And I started to cry, because it was this moment of like, we really, good teachers, have the best intent, right? That the learning beyond the like rote, 1 + 1 is 2, but that the real learning transfers, either soon, hopefully, but even, years later, that there's some learning that will show up. And for this child who, was learning English, was very quiet in the classroom, she was already making these transitions, but in the way that was I think, at least for me, so honorable, that she decided that the way she was going to show her skills was to mimic what she thinks is most valuable about learning, and that was the classroom experience. And it just really kind of solidified for me that, you know, we really have to go with this in best intentions and be willing to like look at the bigger picture. Like, yeah, did they learn their alphabet? Did they learn, you know, whatever the skill set is? Did they learn history? But more, where does it transfer? Where does it become their own? And I think that was such a beautiful illustration of her taking what she understood to be English and the experience of school and transferring that with her family.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I feel the sensitivity that you have for your students and the authentic voice that you bring to the family in this conversation, and how important the family is in communicating with the teachers. And that because you had that interaction, you actually discovered that everything you were teaching was being used, and that that's a wonderful story and celebration of your work, Vera, and I appreciate it. Mike, what about languages and students in high school? So how does that story resonate with you, or anything touch base with you on that topic of language?
Yes, certainly. Definitely, I've had a lot of students who come to the class with, different levels of English or from different variety of backgrounds. And in some ways it can be challenging, but sort of echoing it, in some ways, I think students who come to my class from different paths, I think have learned, how to persevere, and have learned skills that maybe other students don't have. And in a way, they become some of the most successful students in my class, because they've had different experiences, or they've been challenged in different ways that maybe the kid who grew up in town, down the street or something like that, just hasn't been challenged. And I think that I don't know, it gives them the strength that when they're in my room, like it just shows. They tend to be responsible and ask questions and are not afraid. Maybe some of them are, sometimes in that silent period, as you were mentioning, but generally I find they tend to be pretty open and willing to do really anything to make themselves better. And it can be quite inspiring, I think.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Vera, for introducing this topic to the conversation. Mike, what about your pivotal moments as an AP history teacher? What shows up that relates to your students that's made an impact on you?
I think for me at the very beginning, I think I was filled with fear, feeling like, why have I even been selected to do this? And not knowing, I mean, as a history major in college, you don't study everything, and I had this gaps in my knowledge. I had only been teaching for a few years. So really at the very beginning, it was more about me and what I was doing and how I was presenting to the students. And, like it was a lecture primarily. But I think as my confidence grew, and in a sense, like my pivotal moment wasn't one moment in time. It was more of something that accrued over time, where like my confidence grew, allowed me to change my focus and then look at the students more, and then start to gear my instruction based on who was actually in my room, and not what I'm worrying about, what I have to say and what I have to do. And that really was a game changer for me, because it really has become about, observing and trying to intervene with students who are in different, stages of the learning process. And, although I have an AP class or whatever that means, every AP student is different. Every student is different. So like AP really doesn't mean anything in a way, because you just have this variety of students in front of you who all learn differently, who interact with each other differently, who, seek out resources and guidance differently. And so I think I've been, better able in the second half of my career to figure out how best to reach those different students. And I think there are some common strategies that I've used, but it's more about you kind of become an observer and a listener. And even though you're trying to tell them about, the tariff of 1828 or, or something that seems really
Yeah.
not to be, significant in the greater picture of life. But, I think when you do that, what I've found is that, those are the larger, in a way you're hopefully helping that student be a better just person. And you like to think, that you have some impact on that. And I think sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but like
Well, that's part of the
right,
teaching process. So what I'm hearing you say is the big pivot really was taking the attention off of yourself and looking at your students. Vera, how does this relate to you, what you're hearing Mike say, even though his students are high school, yours kindergarten and preschool? What are you taking away from this?
I mean, we really don't have a choice with the little ones about where your attention goes. It's all on them. Just even for safety. They're I think one of my favorite things about working with young kids is even in that, 180 days with them, their growth is so fantastic. And I think when the kind of the magic of being a selfless teacher is that you kind of put a little bit of yourself in them, like your hopes and your desires and your dreams for each individual kid, because they each have an individual like goal or growth that they can make, and things that they can do because, we're all just our own people. But I think some part of early childhood magic is that not only does that growth look different, but it's so fantastic when they've seen that growth for themselves. I think we're really lucky to be a part of that, those
Yeah.
magical years with kids.
Yeah, it is magic. It does look like magic to me, what all teachers do in different ways. And I can see high school students responding to having their own confidence. So a teacher, Mike, you having your confidence, and then the students have confidence, and then the young kids have confidence. Vera, I'm really interested in your book. Share your title, why you wrote it, your social media presence. Just talk a little bit about you, and you're an author. How did that all happen?
Yeah. I don't know what the timeline of events, but I do know like when I was starting to teach in Bedford, and the population I was serving, there was a lot of need for books that had the language that those children spoke. And that was really hard to find quality books in Spanish and Russian and Hebrew. But then I had this realization that additionally, not only, should I have great books in their language, but great books about their culture and the foods that they ate or the ways that their features showed up. And that was not it wasn't plentiful as it is now. And so I use social media as a way to talk with other educators about books so that we can all say like, oh, I'm really looking for a book in Hebrew or a book about, Jewish holidays. Does anyone have recommendations? And it was simultaneously when teachers started sharing more on social media regardless. So they were sharing the way their room looked or the activities they were doing. So it kind of just coincided with that. And yeah, so that just kind of became my social media focus was books and sharing great books, but also occasionally great outfit. And then from there, when we moved to Brooklyn, New York, I still had a steady increase in following and similar content. But the summer when George Floyd was murdered, I made a video because all teachers were learning remotely. Everyone was on computers. So I knew after that event that if I was with my kids, I would have sat with my kids. We would have had a conversation, grade level appropriate, about racism and, what does that mean and how can we speak up? So I made a video talking to my kids. I read a book by Julius Lester, and we just talked about race. And I said, like, it's not okay to treat people differently because of the color of skin. Racism is wrong. And I initially only shared that with my students via Google Classroom, but my husband was like, maybe you want to share that online because I'm sure other educators are feeling similarly. So I did that, and it kind of just went viral and took off. And so I think that moment led a lot of other people to realize that they weren't having the important conversations that they needed to have with kids as young as, 4 or 5. And that there was work to be done. And I call, like, that whole summer was called, the Great Reawakening, where a lot of people realize there's a lot of work we need to do. And so I think that piqued a lot of interest for people to see my account as an account where we can have these conversations. And so that's where my connection with Tori and Corwin came, was this opportunity to say, like, you're already talking about this through social media. How can we make this applicable in the classroom? So a teacher who feels confused or unsure can have a jumping off point with a picture book. And so I call Rebellious Read Alouds, which is the book I did with Corwin, my love letter to teachers, because I feel like it came from a place where we really just wanted kids to feel represented and seen and loved, but also okay to ask questions and stop and say, like, wow, why are some people in wheelchairs, or why do some people use walkers, or why are people different skin colors? Like, why can't we have an opportunity for kids who are seeking understanding to find understanding? And I think picture books are one way where we can have important conversations. So,
and I think the picture books, I know your books are geared K through 2, but I feel like your work transcends grade level, and that picture books for high school kids or adults or any grade level can open the door for these really challenging conversations. So thank you for having this journey, really, that morphed into a book that we can all benefit from. It's really, I can't wait to get a copy, actually. And we'll make sure Mike gets a copy, and we'll see how that book might even fit into the AP class in some ways. Mike, you have a story too. You're part of this book, When I Started Teaching, I Wish I Had Known. And your contribution as an author fits into the final section of the book. I organized the book into 4 seasons. And whereas Vera's work fits in all seasons, that kind of a conversation, the story that you submitted really, for me, fits at the end of the school year. So we think of our seasons as getting started, creating a community of learners, gaining momentum, having our novice teachers find their strengths, staying in the flow, focusing on teaching and learning. And then what happens to many teachers is then the year just ends. And I've included closing the school year with intention. Celebrate our growth as teachers. And your story was selected because it's titled Find Reasons to Celebrate with Your Students, really. Can you share with our listeners what the story is about, and why do you think it's an important story?
Sure. And kind of what makes it sort of special and unique is that the students that I celebrated this sort of end of the year with weren't actually my classroom students. They were my homeroom students. The school was changing its schedule, and we were no longer going to have homeroom. And I had been with this homeroom all the way through from their freshman year. So, they were now seniors, and this is the last day of homeroom at the high school. And so we decided we need to do something. And I had known, I had conversations about sports and music and just casual things, but you got to know these students and how they were doing on their classes, and they had a test in English today or whatever. So we just felt like we knew each other and we needed to do something. So we decided that we would have a homeroom breakfast on the last day. And we would start it a half an hour before school even started. And what made it really great is, again, that these were not my classroom students. Some had been in my class. These were just the kids you see for 5 minutes every day, a little bit. But kids got to the board. They started organizing who's going to bring what. Many things were homemade dishes. They weren't even breakfast foods, which was great. I remember eating a noodle and shrimp dish that was excellent at like 7:10 in the morning. It was quite good. And in retrospect, what I really came to like about that moment, and those kids were just special and nice kids, and we had a great moment there. But what I really liked was that, geez, these are like all different types of students who, you just have everybody's there, the loud kid, the quiet kid, their friends are there. We're playing music, and everybody contributed something. And people contributed things that were unique to their cultural heritage, right? Or things that were just important to them personally, homemade things that they said, this is, the cookies that I always make, or things of this. And I just felt like, man, this is just a really good example of what school can be, and that everybody can contribute something to this greater good, and we can just enjoy each other's company and have fun. And I just thought it was a really sort of like, it was a small little moment. It was the last day of school for seniors, but yet every kid made an effort to like said, hey, this was kind of a special thing, and this 5 minutes a day place. And they're the reasons that it was special, because they were making those contributions all throughout the 4 years of just showing up and being themselves and being friendly. But I don't know, it was just one of those things that you spontaneously happened, that you reflect back on, that shows like the best in people and what people can really offer and do, and what people can do when they sort of work together. And it doesn't have to be that hard. You can just bring
Right.
some
It doesn't
food.
have to be hard.
Yeah, just bring some food and it'll be great.
And let's have some food. Let's have a party. I
Right.
think the message, though, is about intention. It's like intentionally saying we want to celebrate and everything's okay. And food is part of celebration, and dressing up and music and all of that. So I appreciate that story as we close out the school year, that teachers close out with intention. Like, what is it that we're celebrating? And it doesn't have to always be a party. It can be celebrating the individual personalities of each child, and however old they are. So I thank you both for putting the student in this conversation front and center, and all the kinds of students. So as we wind down, I have two more questions for each of you. And one is, so the human side of teaching, we're all teachers, but we do have another life, and we need to keep ourselves balanced. Vera, what do you do for fun that you enjoy? What advice do you have for us, or what do you just do that we might want to do too?
I don't know if it's great advice, so it's cautionary, because it can get expensive.
Cautionary? Okay.
Yeah. I love to shop. I don't know. I love like great clothes, you guys can't see, but hats are in the background. I love to shop a lot for anything.
It's relaxing for you, and is it colorful?
I don't know
Tell
if
me,
it's
like,
relaxing.
your favorite. It's not relaxing. What's your favorite outfit? I hear that you have a lot of them on Instagram, so I'm going to have to go look now. So is that part of your identity? Is you dressed up in clothes, the cool clothes?
Yeah, I think I grew up raised by a single mom, and she was an English teacher, but then transferred out and was a principal and worked at the like admin level. And I think part of it was growing up and seeing my mom dressed well every day, and getting, this idea around, what does it mean to be inspirational and somebody I want to be when I grow up. And I think that just settled with me and just stayed with me. But also I have aphantasia, so I can't visualize in my head. People see apples. If you say see a red apple, someone can see a red apple. I see nothing. And I think that is why I'm so drawn to like bright, colorful, exciting
Okay,
clothing,
all
because it
right.
doesn't show up in my brain. And so I'm excited by, the visual way in which I can style clothes. And yeah, so I
All
don't
right,
know if
I'm
it's
gonna
a
be
great
looking, I'm
hobby.
looking for your clothes and your outfits and your colorful, bright nature that's gonna shine through in your teaching and your work. But do you have a favorite outfit? Is there a favorite?
Um, my moniker on Instagram is the T2T teacher. And
Right,
that
I
came
saw that.
from, yeah, that came from wearing tutus in the classroom.
Okay,
Um,
okay. I
so I
love
don't
it.
really do that now, especially
All
like
right,
after COVID. So previously it would have been, I think, maybe a tutu.
your tutu. All right, I love it. All right, Mike, how do you nourish yourself? Sustain or just to have fun? What's your human activity that's awesome?
So I definitely enjoy like on a Saturday morning just getting out and playing basketball. I think that in a sense that physical activity just, I don't know, just puts you in a different mood. And in a similar way, I enjoy listening to all types of music and collecting music. Um, and I especially in terms of like sort of again putting me in a positive mood or helping me think through great ideas. I think I really like to listen to like long form instrumental music. Um, that just I feel like some of my best ideas come when this music is in the background and it's allowing me to think or even to like process something that was difficult. It helps me move forward and just I don't know I don't know it just I feel like it just brightens my day and I don't know I
All
enjoy it
right,
quite a
it
bit.
works.
Yes.
And do you listen on with the headphones or are you listening?
Ooh,
How are you listening to music?
actually, rarely with headphones, rare,
Okay,
must say,
all right,
rarely, but mostly on anything that will play music.
all
Those who
right.
know me, like,
Vinyl.
know that every room in my house and every part of, like, my classroom here has some pretty okay speakers, or they're not good, but they're loud. So music can be, played basically anywhere that I am.
So that's the vibration, the whole vibration. One thing that I like to do to shift my mood that I really enjoy is I use essential oils, aromatherapy. I don't know if you eat, we can get smells into our houses. We're baking, and I love forest scents because I love forest bathing. So the Christmassy, fir cedar trees and then orange and lemon and lavender to sleep at night. So I encourage our teacher listeners to integrate any of these ideas, not shopping too much though. We don't want the over shopping and the music and maybe some essential oils. So as we close down our session, what do each of you have for wisdom advice to leave our listeners? Our listeners are beginning teachers, experienced teachers. Some are, are challenged by closing out the school year. What advice do you have, Vera?
I think one of the things I think that you probably heard before as teachers is that remember your why. But I don't mean it in the sense of like why you started teaching, but why we are teachers. I think it's the why to remember that the, knowledge and experiences that we share with our students is the why we work with kids. They're our why. We want them to be, global citizens, but in the sense of advocacy, allyship, understanding injustice and inequity, so that they can make things better. So, of course, the piece of you why you started teaching is forever going to be important, but the why we maintain our work with kids is so that they can be, the best parts of us.
Yeah, thank you, Vera. Mike, what are your closing words for us?
I think it would be that every student can contribute something to the greater good. And I think it's also okay as a teacher to that it's a part of the process that you might focus a little bit on yourself or not be able to see that initially, but know that you will get there and you will see that. And that's what will make the job the most rewarding, is when you really start to see the students as the unique things that they bring into your classroom and that they can contribute. And I think every teacher can get there, and that's the
Thank
best
you.
place.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to hand this over to Tori for a summary of our conversation today, and then I'll come back in at the end to close out the episode. Tori?
Yeah, thanks, Carol, and thanks, Mike and Vera. This is a really nice conversation, and I think you both gave great reminders, as Vera said, of why you're teaching and what shines through for as I'm listening to both of you, even though you teach kids at very different ends of the K-12 spectrum, you're both really student-centered and really honoring the kids who are in your care. And I think that is a really helpful reminder, especially at the end of the year, as teachers might be feeling really tired and kind of ready to just wrap up, but like really that message to focus on the little humans and the big humans who are in your classroom and see all the the growth that they've made both academically but as human beings. I heard you both say in different ways that there are lots of things to celebrate about them as people. And that really resonated. I will just tell you a personal story. My son graduated from high school last year, and we both were pretty frustrated by the way folks tend, when they find out that you're graduating from high school or college, the first thing out of a person's mouth is typically, what are you going to do next? Where are you going to go to college? Where are you going to work? And it felt a little frustrating because we were in a place where we wanted to just celebrate, right? Like he had worked really hard to do well in high school, and we didn't want to talk about what's next. We wanted to talk about what's here and now. And I think that's a thing in education where, in kindergarten, you're getting them ready for first grade, and in fifth grade, you're getting them ready for sixth grade, and in high school, you're getting them ready for college. But what I'm hearing you both say is like, enjoy these kids, honor these kids, notice who they are as they leave your room. And they're very different people. They've learned, the learning is really important, but the human side of it is also really important. So thank you for reminding us of that.
Thanks, Tori, for that great summary. And I want to thank all of our listeners for being part of the Teacher to Teacher podcast. I'm going to leave you with this quote from the first American teacher in space, Krista Corrigan McAuliffe. I had a chance to meet her mother at Framingham State College in the 80s, and where they have a beautiful center in her honor. And of course, the tragedy of Krista. I was watching the Challenger and teaching in fifth grade, teaching science. We were all doing the Teacher in Space lesson when the Challenger exploded and we suffered this tragedy. And the quote that I have had on my desk for decades is from Krista, and it says, "I touch the future. I teach." And I want to thank both of you today for this rewarding conversation. You both touch the future, and the ripple effect through your students, you continue to influence others. So thanks to all of our listeners. Until we meet again, bye for now.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today's Teacher to Teacher conversation. We hope this time together energized you, inspired you, and reminded you why you chose to become a teacher. You can purchase any of Carol's books and any books mentioned in the podcast online at www.corwin.com. Please leave a review and share this podcast with your colleagues. Thank you for listening to the Corwin Teacher to Teacher podcast, a place to share teacher wisdom and engage in authentic conversations with experienced educators.
Come explore Corwin's free New Teacher Toolkit and resources. We've curated these resources based on extensive research from teachers, coaches, and principals alike. Whether you are brand new or a veteran teacher, find ready-to-go teaching tools at corwin.com today.